Welcome back to the Cows Report, the podcast where we connect you to the leaders, stories, and ideas shaping the future of college athletics. I'm Will Reese, Cal's director since 2011, and in episode 12, we've got two conversations you won't want to miss. First, our big interview with Ole Miss Vice Chancellor Keith Carter on leadership, alignment, and guiding the Rebels through one of the most dynamic eras in college sports. Then, with college football season kicking off in earnest this weekend, a special segment with ESPN's Pete Thamel, college football writer and insider for College GameDay, sharing his journey, his approach to building relationships, his perspective on the future of the game, and a few nuggets to look out for during this upcoming college football season. Thanks for joining us once again for the Cows Report, where the conversation continues long after the event ends. Hey, Will here. Just want to jump on real quick with a couple of announcements. First of all, we are getting closer to Cal's 25, our 15th annual Collegiate Athletic Leadership Symposium, taking place in Columbus, Ohio, October 5th through 7th. If you're an invited guest, you want to go ahead and register now, as we are starting to get close to full. We fill up every year. We turn people away. We want to keep it a certain size for intimacy and just for the culture of the event that we've loved and experienced over 15 years. So get on there and register now. Also, go to our website, adsymposium.us, to check out our agenda. We just put it up, and it's loaded. Great speakers, great topics. We have over 40 sitting Division I athletic directors on our agenda, lots of practitioners. We have lots of experts. We have Clay Scroggins back with us again, author, leadership speaker, will get us started on Monday morning. Of course, we have national championship coach Ryan Day will be our Sunday night speaker. Keith Carter, who is with us on this pod, will be there with a great session with Ross Bjork and Justin Moore. So Ross with two former deputies. It's just a packed agenda, so go ahead and check that out at our website. Also, just wanted to give a word of thanks and gratitude. This is episode 12, so we have made it through 1 year on the Cows Report podcast. We've had a blast. A huge shout out to Ryan Bradley. Ryan has done such a great job with his leadership of this podcast, and also manning the big interview. He's actually featured twice on this month's episode, but couldn't do it without him, and great appreciation for him. Also, for everybody that's tuned in, listened, followed us, subscribed, all that things. Hope you're getting a lot out of it. We have enjoyed doing it, and hopefully it gets better every episode. We'll continue to, and we'll look forward to year 2 coming up next month. All right, with that, we're going to get to our big interview with Ryan and Keith Carter.
It's time now for the big interview here on the Cows Report podcast. I'm Ryan Bradley, and I'm pleased to be joined this month by the Vice Chancellor for Intercollegiate Athletics at Ole Miss, Mr. Keith Carter. Keith, thanks for making time to be with us. How are things in Oxford today?
Things are good, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Probably like everyone, just, game week is next week, so we're getting excited. I was out at practice earlier today, and, it's just, there's always a buzz in the air this time of year. So, obviously we've already played some soccer, about to play some volleyball and football, obviously. So, a really, really fun time on campus for sure.
Well, classes are underway. You guys are coming off an outstanding year across the board in your athletic programs last year. What are you most looking forward to in terms of Ole Miss athletics heading into this new academic year?
Yeah, I think, you hit it on the head. We had a great year last year overall. For us at Ole Miss Athletics, it was statistically our third best year we've ever had based on Learfield rankings and other metrics. So, really excited about what we were able to accomplish last year. But our theme this year is going to be basically, not looking in the rearview mirror. It's going to be looking out the windshield. There's still a lot to accomplish, and we'll take some glances back and always remember the great things we did last year. But we're really going to focus on, the opportunities ahead. The other thing that's just been kind of cool is, all summer you're kind of dealing with, settlement and minutia around just, what college athletics is becoming, the new model and different things. And it's just fun to go out and watch a soccer match and be around the student athletes and kind of remember, why we're doing what we're doing. So that's been refreshing. And obviously next week we'll get a chance to do it with our football guys.
You mentioned those Learfield rankings. You've seen a lot of success, not just in football, but also recently in baseball, softball, men's and women's basketball last year, making a deep run in the NCAA tournament. How are you working to build that consistent culture of success across all of your athletic programs?
Well, I've said it a lot publicly. That's what we're looking for here at Ole Miss, that consistency. And, I think we've had some really high highs in the history of Ole Miss athletics. We've had some great things. But we've had some pretty significant lows too, and that kind of roller coaster has been pretty volatile at times. So, I think over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been able to do that, be pretty stable across really all of our sports, and our quote unquote kind of big 3 or 4 sports have been very successful. But our Olympic sports have been very successful. So, it's a challenging time in obviously the world we're living in with rev share, and some sports don't get rev share, and how are they going to be able to continue to be successful? So we're trying to figure all those things out, but we certainly want to continue to be a well-rounded athletic department. And, I think we've been able to do that the past few years, and our challenge and our opportunity is to continue to do that.
We hear a lot about alignment in college athletics today. How important is alignment from the chancellor and the trustees, donors and coaches, all the way through your athletic administration in terms of creating that consistency and continuing that momentum that you have right now in your athletic department?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's important really wherever you are, but I think it's really important at a school like Ole Miss, where maybe we don't have quite the resources that some other schools have, even in our league. We've got to be pulling the rope the same direction, and that, as you mentioned, starts with our chancellor, Dr. Glenn Boyce, who's been a great advocate of athletics, a great partner. In this, we basically kind of came in at the same time together and have been kind of, attached at the hip as far as that goes. We've got great administration across campus. I feel like we have a great administration here in the athletics department. You mentioned the donors and fans. Obviously can't do it without them buying season tickets and coming and supporting our collective. And Walker and his team at the collective have been great, as we kind of try to navigate the NIL space. So really just, anyone who's been involved over the past 3 or 4 years, I feel like we've had an incredible relationship. Our Ole Miss Athletics Foundation, Denson Hollis and his team, Matt McLaughlin, who's taken on a new role as kind of our in-house cap management and rev share expert. He's been great. But just everybody across our department, across the city of Oxford, have great town gown relationship with our mayor and local government. So it's just been a really fun ride. And what's really cool is I think, I hope and feel like we're just getting started.
Now, obviously you played at Ole Miss, were a student there, of course. When recruits and families are visiting your campus, what is it that you want them to feel and understand about Ole Miss? What's the story that you're telling from your chair in terms of helping them understand what a special place it is?
Yeah, I do think I have a little bit of a unique opportunity there, as I speak to prospects and moms and dads. And, I came to Oxford, 30 years ago as a freshman from Arkansas and about 4 hours away, didn't know a ton about Ole Miss and kind of first time away from my family. And, I feel like I can talk about that and then go into the fact that I had an incredible experience here as a student athlete. And, we actually had a young man that just got here in the past couple of days from France. It's going to play on our men's basketball team, and was able to meet him yesterday. And, just told him how excited we were to have him and told him a little bit about, just kind of my past here. And, I want to make sure that he has a great experience just like I did. But I think, again, it goes back to the people. I think not only the staff we have here in athletics, the administration we have across campus, but just the people of Oxford, man, they're so welcoming. And, I think that's, our number one attribute for what makes Oxford and Ole Miss great. And I hope our student athletes feel that as well.
We've had a lot of success in football over the last few years. I want to go back to the start of your tenure as the athletic director at Ole Miss. And if I remember right, one of your first charges was to go hire a football coach. So walk us through that experience as a first-time athletic director and having one of the most critical decisions you're ever going to make in that chair thrust upon you in those early days and kind of how you navigated that process.
Yeah, looking back on it, it's kind of funny because I thought the same thing you did when I had to go through that. I was like, man, a week onto the job, I had to, let a coach go, hire a new coach. I mean, it's downhill from here. And then, of course, we know that college athletics has turned into something else since then that's been quite challenging. But, it was hard. I mentioned I had to have a very hard conversation with a good friend, Matt Luke, who he and I were freshmen here together at Ole Miss, and just, unbelievable human being. And we just needed some new energy in the program, and you kind of come off of a hard conversation there, but that, the next task is you've got to go find a coach, and, to bring in Coach Kiffin, and knew he was going to bring some kind of national branding to kind of who he was and what he had done in his career. And I think that we certainly wanted to find a great football coach that kind of fit what we needed. But we needed to win the press conference too. We needed to galvanize our fan base and get them excited. And I think we're able to do that. And obviously, his success over the past 5 years going into year 6 has been incredible. So it worked out really well. I think we all know that hiring, whether you're in college athletics or, at a Fortune 500 company, it's kind of a 50-50 proposition at best. But we've been really lucky that, we've been able to make some good hires, and our coaches have been awesome.
In terms of football and the success and kind of the growth of that program over the last 5 or 6 years, what are some of the things that you and your team have done administratively to come alongside Coach Kiffin and build the infrastructure and the resources necessary for them to compete at the top of the SEC?
Yeah, I think just being totally transparent and candid, we had to change some things. I think we felt like we were running a football program here that was high level, and we were in a lot of ways. But Coach Kiffin brought some ideas and some new way of thinking, and some things he'd seen at Alabama, some things he'd seen at USC and other places he'd been. And so, I think at first maybe we were a little bit resistant. It cost money. It took time. It was different. It was change. But we did those things. And, I think now if you ask Coach Kiffin, I think he feels like he has what he needs to be successful, not only to compete, but to win at a very high level. And, I think you're seeing that. I think there was a stat that, it's us, Alabama, and Georgia that maybe have the most wins in the SEC over the past 4 years. So, it's really exciting. But it takes a little bit of willingness to change, a little bit of willingness to get out of the comfort zone a little bit. Obviously, working very closely with the chancellor and other parts of our administration, and making sure that, football is a priority. And, I think we all know, and I think if you ask our other coaches, they want football to be really good. They want us to sell out the stadium. They want us to, earn that revenue because of that trickle down effect that really affects every other sport. But, it was interesting at the beginning, just kind of what you don't know, and it took a little bit of willingness to change. But, I think we've been able to see some of the success from that.
Change has been the theme for what feels like years now. Even this past week, we've seen changes that will affect the future of the college football playoff, with tweaks to the formula that the committee will use in terms of strength of schedule. Now the SEC announcing that we're going to move from 8 to 9 conference games in 2026. How do those changes impact what you're doing at Ole Miss and the opportunities that you have in the future, because you've been knocking on the door of the college football playoff for the last couple of years?
Yeah, no doubt. And, before, a few years before it went to 12, we were playing in New Year's 6 bowls. I think we would have gone to the playoff in the current format, maybe 3 of the last 8 years before it moved to 12. So we've been playing, very good football and successful football. But I think the changes are good. There's now with NIL and transfer portal, there's so many players that are moving. Talent has been dispersed. You got so much more parity in college football, and really across the landscape of college athletics, because there's good players everywhere now. Everybody has an opportunity to build these great rosters. So I think we've got to continue to look at, playoff expansion. I think we're going to get there, as you mentioned, going from 8 to 9 games in the SEC. I think that's something that's good for us long term. Obviously, for Ole Miss, maybe staying at 8 could have been a little more beneficial just from a record standpoint, I guess, if you kind of look to the past. But I think for the future of the SEC, for the future of the sport, it does make sense. It does make sense. It's something that obviously for the fans, to have another quality game in stadium or on the road each year. We ask our fans to do a lot. We ask them to give, we ask them to come, and we need to find ways to give back to them as well. So I think it's a great move. It's something that we honestly have been kind of anticipating happening, just from discussions behind the scenes and kind of seeing where the landscape is. we kind of, even behind the scenes working on scheduling, we've been preparing for the 9-game, SEC schedule. So it didn't really catch us off guard. We're prepared, and, Coach Kiffin will obviously have another tough game on the schedule, but I think it's really good for our league and good for college football.
You've been leading during the most dynamic period of change in perhaps the history of college athletics. How would you describe your leadership philosophy and your style, and how has that evolved maybe over the last 5 or 6 years as the industry and the problems that you're solving have evolved as well?
Yeah, I think I think one of the things that's been good for me is, I became the permanent AD here in November of 2019. And, as you mentioned, college athletics had kind of been one thing, up to that point. But I kind of became the AD really when a lot of the changes started happening. So I hadn't really settled into a routine as the AD and kind of done it the old way in the past. Obviously came up through college athletics, but in the AD chair, I think I was kind of fortunate to be, the AD as change started happening. So, but I think that, my leadership style is I'm not going to micromanage our staff. I want to hire great people, let them do their jobs, support them in any way that I possibly can. I feel like we've been able to do that. We have a tremendous staff right now. The same with coaches. I don't know what play needs to be called on second or third down. I'm going to let Coach Kiffin and the staff do that. But I want to be there to support. And, if we have to work through something, we'll work through it. But I want it to be fun to come to work. I want us to all enjoy the work we do. We know how challenging it is. I say all the time, especially when we have, events with the families of our staff, we spend more time with each other than we do our families, certainly at certain times of the year, and so it's hard and it's challenging, but you can still have fun. You can still enjoy each other. So I want that to be our environment. And I hope that our staff feels that way, and hope, if they're ever feeling not that way, they would let me know.
Obviously, wins and losses matter a lot, but when it comes to your staff and the way you're trying to move your organization forward, how do you measure success beyond wins and losses in terms of being able to assess, are we getting it right? Are we making progress as an organization?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, obviously we know our first way of getting judged is by the scoreboard. So you got to win games, and that's obvious. But, I think one of the things we've talked a lot about here is, in the world we're living in with young people transferring 2 and 3 and 4 times, where does that land from a getting a degree standpoint? And it's challenging. I think we're going to look back in 5 or 10 years, and there's going to be a lot of young people that don't have degrees, because they were transferring and ran out of eligibility and just, didn't quite finish. And so that's a big charge that we talk to our folks a lot about, is let's do everything we can to make sure that, while we're still tethered to education, let's make sure we're tethered to education. And we want to make sure that they get an awesome degree. But, the 3 things that I really tell, when I'm talking to a recruit and their parents is that, certainly we want you to come here and get a great education. And as I mentioned, and that's not just walking across the stage, that's getting a meaningful degree that, after you go play professional sports for 10 or 12 years, you have something to fall back on that you and your family can build a great life with. The second thing is we want to win. As we mentioned, we're judged by the scoreboard, but we also want, kind of third, is we want to make sure that when student athletes come here, they become a part of our family and they remain a part of our family. And they feel that about Ole Miss. They feel that about Oxford. And again, back to your earlier question, I feel that even if I was not in the role that I'm in, having been a student athlete here, the relationships that I built while I was here, Oxford was always going to be a second home for me, no matter where I landed. So we want to make sure that our young people feel that.
How are you balancing the immediate needs of your department, which I imagine are heavily focused on making sure your programs have the financial resources necessary to compete, with trying to project and build a sustainable business model for the future of your department as well?
Man, that is the well, probably more than $1 million question, maybe, tens of $1 million question. Because at times it feels like you're plugging the dam with chewing gum. You're just trying to solve today. And there's something to be said for that. And I think we've been resourceful and we've been able to do that. But man, thinking about the future, I think it goes back to the question about, 8 or 9 SEC football games. I mean, there's obviously a financial component of that helps long term. And, that's a part of it. We're trying to find, ways to generate revenue that can be, sustainable and those type of things. So it always comes back to in college athletics to revenue generation. How can we find more revenue streams? How can we be more efficient with our expenses? But I do think that in the last couple of years, long-term planning has suffered a little bit because we're trying to, again, plug the dam every day, and the rules change every day, and we're not really sure what we're dealing with. So hopefully we can get some stability, here in the next 12 to 18 months and have some type of model that we know what it looks like, and we can push toward the future.
You mentioned, how you had to make that difficult decision very early in your tenure as an AD with the change in leadership in football. And now you've had a myriad of changes over the last 5 or 6 years. As you reflect on your time as an AD, what are some of the challenges that maybe surprised you and things that have stood out to you in terms of, boy, I didn't anticipate that I was going to be thrust into that type of decision-making process, and how have you learned and grown through some of those challenges that you faced?
Yeah, you were very gracious to send the questions in advance, so I was able to. This one was one that I kind of looked at, and I was like, there isn't kind of a singular answer. It's just there's a lot, and I think from the football situation, that was in November. You roll forward to the next March, then that's when COVID hit. Obviously no manual for that, and it didn't matter if you were in college athletics or whatever business, but that was just a very challenging time. But I think, one of the things that stands out to me is, I was interim AD for about 6 months. We did not have a permanent chancellor. They were going to hire that position first and then do the AD search. But I remember vividly, when Ross left for A&M and really kind of the first day that I was on the job as interim, I was sitting around the same table that I'd sat around for however many years, really in the same chair, we're having the same discussion. But when the discussion was over, it got really quiet and everybody started looking at me. And that was just kind of like I remember that exact moment. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I have to make this decision, And so just being in the chair it's different. And, we're ever evolving. We're always learning. I'm going into my 6th year and, still feel like I'm on my first day. You just want to continue to learn and talk to other people in the business and obviously let your staff do great work. But a lot of challenging decisions that have happened and obviously a lot more that are going to happen.
You came up on the administrative side working in the Ole Miss Athletics Foundation. There were several of you as young administrators who've gone on to have very successful careers as ADs. Talk a little bit about those influences early in your career and some of the mentors that you had coming up and some of the lessons learned through those relationships.
Yeah, it was interesting because I played all 4 years here at Ole Miss with Mike White, who is the head coach at Georgia now, and his younger brother, Danny. I obviously met throughout those years, and little did I know that, however many years later that Danny would hire me in the Ole Miss Athletics Foundation. I was able to work, with him and under him, and then also with Alan Green. It was a really fun time. I was green and naive, didn't know much about that side of college athletics. And so obviously Danny was great. Alan had been in the business for a little while, so he taught me a ton. Kevin White and others, like it just, I've learned a lot about that. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions to people around you, people that have been in the chair for a long time, people that have done similar things that you're trying to figure out. And so, I owe a lot to those guys, just being in the trenches with them here at Ole Miss early in my career. Ross was great to me, as the AD, put me in a position to, make some hard decisions as the deputy athletics director and really, obviously not an easy transition into the AD chair, but, some of the things I'd seen before. And so that was a credit to Ross and others. So, if I had any advice to give to young people that are coming up, don't be afraid to ask questions and build those true relationships because, as you know, Ryan, our world is a small world in college athletics. It seems big at times, but man, it always comes back to a relationship, here and there.
Really good. We know the days are long, and the challenging issues just keep coming. What are some of the things that you've done, or maybe some of the habits that you've incorporated into your daily routine that help keep you grounded and healthy and focused as a leader?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. I like to work out. That's kind of a stress reliever. And I love to get outdoors, hunt and fish. And we're able to do that here around Oxford. So, that's something that I'm enjoy doing. But I think everybody, and we talk to our staff all the time, like you have to find some outlet. Of course I love hanging with my family and kids playing sports and doing all those things. And although sometimes those are more stressful than what we deal with here at Ole Miss. But you got to find that outlet, and you can't be afraid to say, hey, I'm going to go on vacation. Try not to call me. If you can solve it, solve it. And when somebody else is on vacation, we're going to solve their problems. You just have to kind of have that give and take, because our world is hard. It's really hard. It's a lot of hours. You look up and you're working off of, 4 hours sleep, and you got to go on another trip. And it's just a crazy world that we live in. So I would just encourage people to, one, find that outlet, and then don't feel bad about using that outlet. We all work hard. We know it's not 9 to 5, but you got to find a way to recharge. So I would certainly encourage that.
It's good. All right. CALS is all about equipping and connecting leaders. You mentioned one thing a minute ago, which was asking great questions. What other career advice do you have for those emerging athletic administrators who are coming up in the industry in terms of how they approach professional development and relationship building?
Yeah, I think it's super important, to, again, find some people that, can pour into you, find some people that you can pour into. I think there's always, no matter where you are in your career, you always have an opportunity to lead. And so I think that's important. I tell young people all the time, it's amazing how many requests I get to meet with, folks who are students here at Ole Miss or young people in the business that want to jump on a quick Zoom. And I try to do it. I think it's important. People help me along the way. I want to help them. But what I tell them is, man, just roll your sleeves up, put your head down, go to work. And I think that is, that to me, and some of us that, I consider myself a little more old school in the business now. That's what we look for. We want people that aren't afraid to do anything from taking the trash out to, the most prestigious, task there is. That's what we're looking for. And I think that, obviously you want to have career, goals, and you want to try to grow your career. But if you do good work where you are and keep your feet planted and do that work there, people are going to notice. They're going to notice, and you're going to get those opportunities probably more than if you're actually out hunting opportunities. I truly believe that.
The job has changed a lot since you first started working in college sports. When you think about the current challenges you're facing, what skills or experiences are most important for a leader to possess in order to navigate these issues and be successful in terms of potentially becoming an AD who can handle the myriad of challenges that you're facing today?
Well, first, let me just say I don't have all of that figured out. We're still trying to figure that out every day. I think, while our business has gone a little bit more towards rocket science, it's not rocket science, what we do. It's about relationships. It's always going to be about relationships. It's always going to be about integrity. It's always going to be about the core values that we've always talked about. But I do think that, if I had to go back and if I was 22 coming right out of college, I would make sure that I'm educated in finance. I'm educated in business. I'm educated in revenue generation. Those things are super, super, it's all we talk about. It's literally all we talk about now, and trying to find those and stretching a dollar as far as you can. And, I think that's really, really important. So, if you got the hard work, you got the integrity, you got the core values, and you got some business sense to you, I think those are going to be super important as we move forward.
You've been gracious enough to join us for CALS several times in the past. How important are events like CALS for industry leaders and those who are trying to come up in the business in terms of building those relationships and continuing to invest in themselves and their personal and professional growth?
I think they're really important. I even think we just had AD meetings down in Birmingham the last couple of days, and a little different from your question, but just being around your colleagues and being around your peers and understanding that, we're sitting here in Oxford, Mississippi, we're in our bubble. Sometimes we think the sky is falling. We're never going to figure this out. Well, guess what? There's 15 other ADs that I just sat with that are in their bubble in their city thinking the same thing at times. So I just think sometimes you can refresh. You can say, oh, okay, it's a deep breath. We're not in this alone. But as far as the mentorship, that a CALS provides, I think it's invaluable. I really do. And I think that the relationships you can build, that just the camaraderie you can have. And again, being kind of in a safe space with other kind of like-minded administrators. No coaches there. You get a chance just to kind of commiserate a little bit and talk through some things and, put ideas on the table. I just think those things are really, really important.
If we were having this conversation 10 years from now, and you were reflecting on the last 10 or 15 years in your tenure as the AD at Ole Miss, what do you hope people would be saying about that period of time and your legacy leading the athletic department?
I think legacy is such a hard concept at times because, I think you're right in the middle of it. You're right in the middle of the journey. We all want people to think we did a good job. Right. And so, but there's so many layers to that in what we're doing. We get an opportunity every day to, mold the minds of young people and get to know young people. I mean, to me, that's been one of the greatest things about sitting in this chair relative to the development chair that I came up through is that I get to go to practice. I get to travel to competitions and meet these young people, meet their parents, build those true relationships. So I just hope that, we want to win games. Nobody wants to be the AD that, you didn't win games, but I hope that, for a lot of reasons that people look back on my time here and say, hey, he worked really hard, put a great staff together, won a lot of games, but touched a lot of people too and was good to people. I think ultimately that's, you want people to know that you cared about them.
When you think about just the year ahead and maybe the short-term goals, because it's so hard now to have a 5-year plan, what excites you most about the opportunities that are right in front of you and your athletic programs and where you think you can go in the short-term future for Ole Miss?
Yeah. We had a head coaches meeting yesterday and we talked about that. And, we talked about the fact that we just had this great year, third best year we've ever had. But guess what? That year's over. We got to move forward. And those coaches feel the same way. They're ready to roll. But I think, we've done it for 5 years. I think the next 5 years we have so many opportunities. We got to kick through the door of the college football playoff. We've got to, Coach Beard's wanting to go to the Final Four. Coach Yo's wanting to go to the Final Four. And I think we can do all those things. We got to continue to support and give resources. But I think, what happens if you're a competitor, when you have a little success, you want more. You want more success. And I think we have a great culture of competitiveness on our administrative staff, our coaches, our student athletes. Our chancellor is a former, athlete. Like, he wants to win. And so I think we've gotten a little taste of it, and we just want more. And I think we can get there.
Well, congratulations on all your success, Keith. We know it's a really busy time of year, so thanks for taking a little bit of time to spend with us and with the Cows audience. We always appreciate your time and the way that you give back to this community. We look forward to seeing you very soon.
Awesome, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Keith. Welcome back here on the Cows Report podcast. I'm Ryan Bradley, and we are excited for a special segment this month with our good friend Pete Thamel, college football senior writer for ESPN and the insider for College GameDay. Pete, thanks for being with us. I know it's a really busy time of year. I hope you're rested up and ready to go as we are on the precipice of another college football season.
I'm just disappointed Will Reese couldn't grace us with his presence here, Ryan. I'm sure he is hobnobbing in Nantucket with his blue blood friends, gallivanting through Chatham on Cape Cod as he did this summer. I know Will often doesn't have time for the little people, so I do hope he's enjoying himself amongst the beautiful people in New England.
I'm sure there is no doubt about that. And also, there are some time constraints on this podcast. If it had been me and you and Will, we would have had to allot at least, an hour to an hour and a half for this conversation. We just don't have
that would have been just to say hello with Will.
No question. But we do appreciate you making time to be with us. As we are recording this, we are entering week one. Just a few football games played last weekend, but gearing up for the official opening weekend of college football. I want to get into all of that in just a few minutes, but want to start for our Cows listening audience by taking a step back and asking you to just tell us a little bit more about you and your journey. So you've been one of the most trusted voices in college athletics reporting for a long time now, but let's go back to the beginning. How did you get your start in journalism, and what were some of those key milestones or turning points for you along the way in your career that ultimately led to you having the platform that you have today?
Sure. Well, I think, Ryan, it all starts with me being a very, very pedestrian athlete. And pedestrian may be a generous descriptor. Grew up in Massachusetts, loved sports, was not particularly adept at playing them at any high level. And so just tried to find an avenue to channel that passion in a different way. That really started through writing, and it brought me to Syracuse, where many of my media brethren have also gone to school. And that place really did me right, man. The Newhouse School was a great education. The Daily Orange, the newspaper, was really where I learned this craft. And journalism isn't a textbook subject, right? It's a go out and experience it subject. And for 4 years I was out there every day. Football games, basketball games, lacrosse games, a lot of lacrosse games there. And, just real world, nothing beats real world experience. I worked with and alongside great journalists there. There were great journalists at the local paper that you watched work at Syracuse Post-Standard, where I ended up starting my career. And just kind of built and grew from there. 4 years at Syracuse, 3 years at the Syracuse Post-Standard, which was a great newspaper, great place to work. It's now kind of Syracuse.com, still under Syracuse newspapers umbrella. That town and that city has an unrivaled passion for college athletics. So it's when you cover something and it matters, the education increases because there's scrutiny from, the readers. So from there, I bounced around a little bit, and in '04 became the national college sports reporter for the New York Times. And that started this journey. I think this is my 21st or 22nd year covering national colleges. And that '04, to bring you back, was the height of the Pete Carroll era at USC. Urban Meyer was the Utah coach with Alex Smith as his quarterback. Joe Paterno was the Penn State coach. It was a long time ago. But from there, I've covered national college football and college basketball every year since, and been really grateful for, all the opportunities the life has afforded me. I went from 9 years with the New York Times, Sports Illustrated, went to Yahoo from there. And then this is going to be the start of my 4th year at ESPN. And it's been an awesome an awesome journey to see college sports really explode over that period of time. And from starting as in a pure print journalism role to now seeing how dynamic the media is and how much has changed. It's been a fascinating ride.
We're going to talk about all that change here in just a few moments, but you are known as somebody who's really connected, has a lot of strong relationships throughout the industry. I want to ask you, how important has relationship building been for you in your career? And how would you describe your approach to building those relationships and building trust with coaches and ADs and sources throughout the college athletics industry?
Yeah, it's it's funny. It's not something where you wake up every day and say, I'm going to build sources and relationships today. Let's embark on that journey. The best relationships are the ones that are built organically. As you grow and move on and meet more and more people. Look, there's 136 FBS football programs now, and we're in the 360s in college basketball. It's a lot of schools, a lot of coaches, a lot of different people. You can't Ryan, microwave relationships. You can't just meet somebody and make it happen. There has to be sort of a process of a give and a take, and you can't meet somebody and implore to them why it's important to have a relationship with a reporter. They kind of, I've learned they have to realize it along the way, and that helps build the relationship. And also, I'm going to be motivated to build a relationship if they're at a place where, where there's information that's important to me. So, in a lot of times it happens, you meet somebody 2-3 times, really before you really start growing and in building that relationship. And what I've learned over the years now is, and I impart on young coaches and, the types of ADs who go to Cals, is that in your journey, whether you're a coach or athletic director, you are going to need to be able to talk to the media. If you're a coach, front-facing stuff is 10% of your job. If you're an athletic director, my old line is you really need the media the 10% of the time things are going really well, right? Hey, Tide's undefeated, 6-0, game day's coming to town. You need to leverage that. You slip to 4-2, things aren't going that way. Well, you need to message that, right? Like, so, and the magic of the relationship, Ryan, I think is the 80% in the middle when things aren't particularly good, aren't particularly bad. And you're just, interacting, normally as a, as a person. So, but I do think for the Cal's audience, Ryan, it's important to begin the journey earlier in your career, even if you're not a front-facing person, even if you're not going to be quoted in articles and you're not in a position a lot of times to be quoted in articles, being able to build personal relationships with reporters and rapport with reporters and understanding their job and what they do. Your local newspaper beat writer has a very different job than your local 247 reporter, who has a different job than your team broadcaster. And media, if you're in big time college athletics, is always going to be the top revenue stream that essentially funds your paycheck, right? Funds your department. So learning and understanding all the different facets of media, Ryan, I think is a very critical piece for, for young and up and coming athletic directors to do. And a fluency in that world and an understanding of that world is something that I'd encourage them to be very intentional about.
That's really good advice. We were talking a little bit before we started the recording about what a busy summer it has been. Busy summer for you, both personally and professionally. So maybe let's talk about that just a little bit. But also, looking back at the beginning of the summer, we finally got resolution in the House settlement, and then everything.
And it seems like 6 months ago.
Yeah, and that didn't necessarily bring all of the clarity that maybe everyone had hoped for. When you reflect on the summer, what have been some of the biggest off-season summer developments for you in terms of how you think it's going to impact the fall and the future of college athletics as we know it?
Well, the House settlement was a funny thing, Ryan, because an entire billion-dollar industry had already planned on the results of the House settlement before the House settlement came. Like, Dan Wetzel, who I work with now and I've worked with in the past at Yahoo, has a great line. He says, if you're on vacation in Switzerland and you tried to explain college athletics to just like a random guy you're sitting next to on the train, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Because it all doesn't make any sense. Yes, $1 billion industry is going to have its rules made by a California judge settling a lawsuit that's going to cost the industry billions of dollars. Like that's in no way that, is that logical? If it's the movie script, they throw it out, but here we are and here it is. And now we have a college sports commission to try to do things that the NCAA had failed to do. And quite frankly, that schools have made it hard for the NCAA to do. And it looks like they're going to make it hard for the College Sports Commission to do it as well. So that's been, I think, one of the more interesting developments is Brian Seeley's group. And it's been, I think my years in this have gotten me to be a little bit cynical. I'm from the Northeast, so I'm more cynical than most of the folks we run into anyway. But I think we're starting to see the revelation that what we knew all along, that like a lot of schools don't want to follow the rules, right? Like, if there is that we've been indoctrinated in this business to, when rules are built, to find loopholes around them, right? Like that's just the way it's gone for years and years and years. And I think there's a naivety to think, oh, now a new group's going to make the rules. Everyone will just get in line and follow them. So there's been a race for the gray area really this summer, which I think has been very interesting. How can you find outside NIL? How can you get it through the College Sports Commission, right? Like how can you make your secondary payment methods above board as opposed to, getting flagged? And that's really like going to determine the future of programs, ultimately in big time college football and college basketball.
When you think about those early years at the New York Times covering college football from a national perspective to what you've been doing for maybe the last 4 or 5 years, how much has it shifted in terms of you reporting on the business of college sports versus the sport itself?
So it's interesting. Like it's hard to describe just how drastically different media and college sports are now. I used to go to the, college football playoff meetings and, oftentimes I was the only reporter there, right? We're talking like early days. They used to be the BCS meetings. They used to be in Phoenix a lot. John Junker used to host everybody out there at the from the Fiesta Bowl. And now, like I would get the information, go sit down, write it, and it would appear in the newspaper the next day, right? And now it's just this, sprint to have the first tweet, first alert, all that kind of stuff, and it's just wildly, drastically different thinking about those early years. I mean, people didn't know who the stars of college sports were. Like that was part of the reason why, when I was at the New York Times, people were so welcoming, because it was like you are giving people information. Whereas now, the stars of college sports we're following on Instagram when they turn 14, and there's documentaries around them. It's just the way college athletics are publicized is just radically and drastically different. And that's, the rise of the internet, the rise of social media. And, the only constant is change in this environment. And in my job, you have to survive and adapt. And, I do a lot more breaking news now. There's a lot more, the rise of betting has made injury information a lot more coveted and valuable. So, and that's part of my job on College GameDay is to give updates on that stuff. And now we're seeing even the injury stuff being, the injury information being put up by the conferences now, which, 5 years ago would have been unheard of. And we've started to see the trickle of that go through. The Big 12 just put out their first injury report for Armageddon over in Ireland and things. So yeah, the way college sports are covered, it just couldn't be more different.
All right, switching gears now. We're just a few days away from the first College GameDay of the fall. Coach Corso's final show this weekend. We've already seen these tearjerker tribute videos going out on the social media platforms. What else do you have?
The documentary, Ryan? Have you watched it yet? Have you watched the documentary?
I have not got to see the documentary yet, but looking forward to it.
You should watch it with your crew. This is not like I have an ESPN hat and I want to recognize that, but if I didn't have an ESPN hat, it is a wonderful, rollicking walk through the history of college football the last 40 years, right? You see Beano Cook flash up there on the screen, but you see all these coaches that Coach Corso interviewed, all the personalities around him. I mean, he's lived an unbelievable American life. Burt Reynolds was one of his best friends from college at Florida State. He had the interception record at Florida State until Deion Sanders tied it. He was a wonderful player. If anyone really is, and I'm going to tweet this out again this week, I've done it once or twice before. If anyone really wants to go on a Coach Corso dive, there's an article from Sports Illustrated in 1977 about him as a coach. It's from Indiana. It's basically, more things change, more they stay the same, right? It's basically an article about the Big Ten and how Indiana's trying to catch Ohio State and Michigan, and the challenges of doing that. But I think John Underwood wrote it, who's an iconic Sports Illustrated reporter from back in the day. It's a 5,000 word deep dive profile of Lee Corso, and he was wildly ahead of his time. Motivating through love and not fear, loving his play. It was remarkable. I never knew Lee Corso as a coach. I'm sure you didn't either, right? I just knew him as, the zany guy from TV. So I would recommend the documentary. Gets the highest recommendation, but if anyone really wants to go on a dive, of course, if he reminds me, his story of coaching and who he was at the time reminds me a little bit of like a PJ Fleck. Someone who beats to their own drum, maybe a little controversial and divisive, but is convicted in what they do and how they do it, and embraces the fact that that's a little bit different than the industry standard. So, we're really excited for Columbus this weekend, Ryan, to send Coach Corso off, in a great way. It's gonna be emotional. He's a powerful, transformative figure in the history of college football.
We are looking forward to that. You are starting your fourth season with College GameDay. What have been some of the most memorable experiences for you over the course of the last 3 years, and what have you learned from being part of the show?
I've learned a lot. it's hard to be good on TV. And, my indoctrination to it was live TV in front of thousands of people and then millions of people watching at home. So grateful for all the people there, especially behind the scenes, who've worked with me on becoming a better television reporter. It's been energizing at this stage of my career to try to learn a new skill, right? Telling stories on TV, reporting on TV, and it's been a good challenge to face. College GameDay is a juggernaut. It's a machine. I'm happy to be a very, very small part of that juggernaut and in that machine. And I don't think the people that watch at home really appreciate the true behind the scenes that make the circus happen. You've been backstage at GameDay, right, Ryan? I mean, you've seen the infrastructure, the setup, the logistics. I mean, it is to move it from Tuscaloosa one week to Norman the next week to Eugene the next week and have everything run smoothly takes some of the best logistics skills and operations people in the country. And we have awesome people behind the scenes. And then obviously the on-air folks, start with Reese Davis, right? It is very difficult to be the lion tamer in the GameDay circus. And he does a wonderful job with that. And really genuinely loves the sport of college football. Deep, he's Alabama grad. So I see you smiling and shaking your head. It's the sport is deep in his soul and it shows. And then, obviously just the cast of characters from there have all been a blast to work with and get to know. I didn't really know anybody there when I started. So, and you travel with these people for 20 straight weeks, basically. After a couple of years, it is like a family. And I think that vibe comes through. That's why people welcome us, in their living room on Saturday mornings. They feel that warmth. It's genuine. Be it Kirk, Dez, Pat, obviously is, just a lightning bolt. And then, Coach Saban, it was just awesome to work with in his first year. His preparation was unbelievable. And, he certainly, Ryan, grasped the vibe of the show and adopted to that. It adapted to that, I should say. And, it's a lot of fun to see him put on the costume at Penn State, right? Like that's something that, I'm sure people in Alabama weren't, that side of him, he kept guarded, but he's been such an authoritative addition, to what we do. And, he keeps everybody on point now. Like, in meetings, nobody's late. Everybody's backs up straight. We're, he's still got an edge, and it comes through in his preparation and his passion for the sport. Really, I think also really comes through as well.
Yeah, that being on point, not surprising in the least, but it has been really fun for those of us at Alabama to watch how much he has enjoyed being part of the show. And you touched on just the camaraderie. It translates through the TV that the people involved with this show really enjoy being together and doing the show. We know it's a lot of hard work, a lot goes into it, but I think part of the appeal is just how much the people working on that show enjoy that. And I assume that's been your experience, is that is part of the magic that makes it happen.
Yes, no. And you can't fake that, right? Like it's a lot of really good, talented people who are hardworking, who like working together. The vibe when we're out to dinner on a Thursday night in a college town, watching games, sitting around talking, like I think about Stanford Steve, for example, it's, a normal Thursday with Stanford Steve at dinner is much like, what you see of him on the game day set or with SVP or whatever, that's like talking about players, talking about lines, talking about, just all of the stuff. And one of the cool things about game day is like people care about Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, USC, but they also really care about New Mexico, James Madison, every level of the sport. It resonates through, and there's a passion for all of it. Yeah. You'll get convicted Tulsa takes, from the office. It just shows that everybody really follows and cares about the sport at every level. And I think one of the things that the game day tries to do is honor the whole sport. Right. We just don't talk about the big brands. We also incorporate all of the zaniness of college football is what makes it great. Right. You have Farmageddon and you've got the U and you've got Seattle. Like it's all, from coast to coast, from every type of school, private, public, farm, inner city. Like you have a little bit of everything. And that's what makes it special.
Yeah. And it's been cool. Even however many years we were into College GameDay now, still looking for new places to go that we've never been before. And we've seen in the last couple of years a concerted effort to get to some of those places. It's always really magical when you guys are live on a scene for the very first time. Thinking about along those lines and looking ahead to the fall, what are a few of the storylines that we need to watch for that you think could surprise some people in terms of the year ahead?
Yeah. I think just one of the big picture things about this season in particular, Ryan, is that we're in a golden age of college quarterbacks right now. Two years ago, the first round pick record was broken for quarterbacks in the NFL draft, I believe, was 6. And I'm not saying that record's going to be broken again, but it should be tested. There's a lot of high-end college quarterbacks right now, Ryan, that I think are really going to shine. Obviously, Arch Manning has demanded a lot of the attention, but when you look throughout the Big 12, when you have Sawyer Robertson and Josh Hoover, we saw Avery Johnson and Rocco Beck, in a little bit of a gunslinging battle over the weekend. You go up and down through the ACC with Carson Beck, at Miami right now, and obviously Cade Klubnik. I just think there's the quality of high-end quarterback play in the sport has never been better.
Last week, we had some news. The SEC finally making the decision to go from 8 conference games to 9 effective 2026. The college football playoff expansion talks are ongoing. Where do you think this is going to land in the near term regarding both access and format and some level of consistency across the major conferences in terms of how they set things up moving forward and trying to have some level of consistency in terms of what the format is going to be for the college football playoff?
It'll be fascinating. We'll know in the next few months, but I do think there's a stalemate. We end up at 12, or people link arms and we end up at 16. I think that's if we were to distill it to a short version, and there's a million variables, between selection process and the committee and such, that we can go down all those rabbit holes. But I think that's what we're picking between right now, and we'll see as people push forward where it ends up landing.
I want to ask you, from your perspective, the overall health of college football. How would you assess it, and where would you encourage coaches and athletic directors to focus their energies in terms of just trying to assess where we are, how we can make it better, and how we can, you keep hearing this word sustainable. How do we make it sustainable? What would be your words of wisdom in terms of controlling the things that we can control on the university sides to try to get this to a more solid place?
Sure. I think that when the foot hits the ball, the sport has never been better. It's never been more popular. I don't think it's ever been better played. I just think the actual sport of college football is in a golden age right now. As for what can be controlled, my advice to young administrators would be learn how to raise money, because it's not going to get cheaper to do this. And even the efforts to cap and rein in are not really going to work. So it is an arms race. It's always been an arms race. It used to be an arms race with stadiums and weight rooms and waterfalls and all that stuff. And now it's just an arms race for cash. That's what it is. And an embrace of that and understanding of that, and a focus on finding revenue streams and fundraisers and fundraising is ultimately what's going to be the path to surviving and thriving in this dynamic environment.
You mentioned the quarterbacks as maybe one of the themes for this year. What are some of the other themes or things that you're looking forward to heading into this college football season? Beyond just stop talking about all the off-field things and being able to focus on the games themselves.
Sure. I think one thing that's interesting about this year, Ryan, is that we're pretty much out of COVID quarterbacks, right? So what you're actually seeing is a lot of new starters getting the opportunity. I think it's 5 or 6 of the starters in the top 10 are new starters. You got Carr at Notre Dame, obviously Ty Simpson, where you are, the 2 starters in Ohio State, Texas, Arch Manning. Not sure if you've heard of him, Julian Sayin. And I think there's just not as many veteran guys to come in and take those jobs right now. Though I will say Maverick McIver, who played for Western Kentucky this year, is a 6th or 7th year senior. He's been around so long that he committed to Cliff Kingsbury at Texas Tech. We have Zach Calzada playing for Kentucky, who is a 7th year senior who entered college in 2019. So there are still a few of those guys remaining, but for the most part, we're going to see some new blood. And I think that's going to ultimately create some uncertainty. obviously everybody ranked in the top 10 to start the year doesn't finish there. And if those quarterbacks have growing pains, and the extent of the growing pains, we'll then be able to, we'll ultimately chart the trajectory for those programs that they're in. But I do think that has added some nice variance to this season. And look, last year at this time, if I told you that Arizona State, Indiana, and SMU would make the playoff, you would have got me drug tested, right? And I do think one of the cool things about this new era is that there might not be 3 shocking teams, that I don't think would have been ranked to start the year now. I mean, SMU almost lost in week 0 to Nevada last year. So I think that unpredictability is really healthy for the sport. And I look forward to see who rises up and surprises us.
Got time for maybe one more question. I want to gear this one towards the Cal's audience, which is primarily those up-and-coming aspiring athletic administrators. We talked earlier in our conversation about your words for advice for current athletic directors, but thinking about those who are not yet in the chair yet and maybe haven't had as much access to people like yourself and the media, what advice would you have for them in terms of building relationships with the media and beginning to think about strategically about how the media will be part of their success as a future leader in the industry?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, in your baby steps of, learning the media, Ryan, I think is a really important part of interacting with the media, right? Learning and understanding the people who are in the media in your market is going to go a long way in determining how you go on and interact with the media in the future. So I would advise those young ADs to be intentional. That, look, where the media sits at all your games. Get to know them as people, engage with them, offer them, say, hey, look, if you're writing something about NIL and I could be an assistance off the record to guide you with your story to help you, not necessarily be quoted, but just to help further your understanding or direct you to places to go. Offer yourself as a resource behind the scenes to them and just kind of get to know them and learn what they're doing. I mean, I think one thing from the macro that young administrators maybe don't think about as much is, like, you have your job because of the media. So don't be naive and think like that'll take care of itself, or you can delay learning that piece of the job. Like, the media is always going to be there, no matter where you are. Like, and quite frankly, the point of universities spending all this money on college athletics is the publicity that comes from it. It is like that fundamental and core to what you're doing. So the sooner you develop comfort, and the sooner you don't look at it as like transactional, like, oh, I'm going to talk to this guy and he's going to do a story on me, but rather I'm going to like get to know and understand this space. Eventually that may yield you some positive publicity, but it may not. It also may yield some positive publicity for your athletes or your department, or, but if you approach it with trying to usher in a better understanding for the people who, are covering your school, I think that's probably the best way to approach that.
That's great insight. Well, hey, Pete, really appreciate you making time. I know it's a really busy time of year. Congratulations on the new baby, the new addition to the Thamel family, just a few weeks ago. But again, grateful for the investment and the time that you make and being a part of what we do with Cals and investing in this community. And grateful certainly to you and the team at ESPN for the amazing job you do telling the great and transformational story that college football is, that we all look forward to. So excited to see you this weekend on the television, and look forward to a great college football season ahead. And again, just thanks for making time for us.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Appreciate being like a de facto step sibling of the Cals family.
That is a very high moniker for anyone to hold. So congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
That wraps up episode 12 of the Cals Report. A big thank you to Keith Carter and Pete Thamel for joining us, and thanks to you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on YouTube and social media at AD Symposium for more clips and updates. The Cals Report is an extension of the Collegiate Athletic Leadership Symposium, building community, sharing ideas, and investing in the next generation of leaders. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep leading the way in college athletics.